started with a voicemail, a message no one knew existed until it surfaced. Accidentally recovered from an old flip phone in a dusty box marked Emily's Things. The voice on the message was shaky, barely audible over what sounded like the buzzing of fluorescent lights and distant footsteps. "I think someone's in the walls. If anything happens to me, check the East Wing. Please, don't let them seal it." March 14, 2010, 2:58 a.m. Just 4 minutes before nurse Emily Rourke vanished forever. Emily was 26, bright, warm-hearted, the kind of nurse who remembered your pet's name and how your coffee was always 1 sugar, 2 creams. She wasn't just liked at Crestwood General. She was beloved. Her co-workers described her as someone who made the hospital feel less like a morgue and more like a sanctuary, even during its final, crumbling years. Crestwood had been steadily losing funding, losing patients, and losing light, both literally and figuratively. One by one, fluorescent tubes died out and were never replaced. Sections of the building were closed off due to mold and blackouts. The East Wing, where Emily's last shift took place, was the most decayed of all. A week before her disappearance, she'd been unusually quiet. Less sunshine, more shadows under her eyes. She told her younger sister over dinner, "There's something wrong at Crestwood. It feels like the walls remember things they shouldn't." Her sister thought she was just exhausted. She was wrong. March 14, 2010. It was the night of a full moon, though you wouldn't know it inside Crestwood. The power had flickered several times that day, leaving only the emergency backup lights humming dimly through the halls. Patients were restless. One in Ward 6 kept muttering, "She's coming tonight. She always comes when the clocks stop." At 2:43 a.m., Emily signed out some gauze and morphine from the supply cabinet. Security footage showed her walking calmly down the hallway, clipboard in hand, ponytail swaying gently as she turned the corner toward the supply room. At 3:02 a.m., a motion camera inside the room caught her entering. She flicked on the light. She looked up. Then the footage glitched. For exactly 3.6 seconds, the screen went black. Just static and a faint distortion, almost like a whisper beneath the static. When the picture returned, Emily was gone. No exit, no movement, no evidence of struggle. She simply vanished from the frame. Cameras outside the room showed nothing. No one entered or exited. The room itself was locked from the inside. It took security 40 minutes to break it open. And when they did, the room was empty. No Emily, no blood, no signs of violence. Just her badge on the floor and a strange black smudge on the wall behind a metal shelf. It looked like soot, but it was ice cold to the touch. They searched for weeks. Drones, dogs, infrared scans of the hospital, nothing. A statewide alert was issued. Her face was on milk cartons, on billboards. Her parents went on the news, begging for answers. But Crestwood just closed. Quietly, permanently. The case was sealed just like the hospital. And the mystery went to sleep. Until 14 years later. Spring of 2024. A real estate firm announced plans to renovate the old Crestwood building into luxury apartments. Contractors were brought in. The old tiles ripped up. The mold scraped down. The dead walls opened one by one. Then, on a gray Wednesday morning, 2 workers in hard hats were tearing down the crumbling plaster in the old East Wing. Specifically the room where Emily was last seen. Behind that wall, they found something. A hollow space, a hidden chamber, and inside it, a preserved nurse's bag. Next to it, something far more disturbing. A leather-bound journal, soaked at the edges but still intact. The first page read, "If this is found, know that I didn't leave. I was taken. The walls closed behind me. Emily Rourke, RN. The police were called. Forensics, historians, paranormal investigators. What was this hidden space? Why did no blueprints show it existed? How did no one hear screams or find anything for 14 years? And perhaps the most chilling question, if the room was sealed from the inside, how did her journal end up outside the wall? What happened that night was no ordinary disappearance. It wasn't just a cold case. It was a cold silence. And now, it's breaking. But what do you think happened that night? Did Emily discover something she wasn't meant to see? Or was something waiting on that wall all along? Tell us your theory in the comments below. Could this be proof of something far more sinister at play in old hospitals like Crestwood? If this story already has you questioning reality, like, share, and subscribe, and turn on notifications before you get lost in this chilling true crime mystery. The wall had a heartbeat. That was the first thing Marco, the foreman, said when the police questioned him. "I don't know how else to describe it," he muttered, his voice hollow. "When we cracked into it, the air felt alive, like something behind there had been waiting." The day after the discovery of the nurse's bag and the journal, the building was placed under lockdown. The media caught wind. Reporters circled the property like vultures. Drones hovered overhead. But inside that silent, mold-ridden shell of a hospital, something far more unsettling was happening. The room was breathing. The chamber behind the wall measured only 5 feet wide and just over 7 feet tall, claustrophobic, with crumbling bricks lining one side and rotting wood on the other. There were scratch marks on the inner surface of the plaster, some fresh, some nearly eroded away. One of the renovation workers, a young apprentice named Elijah, hadn't spoken a word since they opened the cavity. He sat outside the wing, rocking slightly, eyes unfocused. When police asked what he saw, he finally whispered, "She was there, in the wall. I swear." Her hand moved, but no remains were found. Just the bag, the journal, a small, blood-stained shoe. Forensic analysts confirmed that the nurse's bag and journal did belong to Emily Rourke. The ink had faded, but under UV light, a hidden set of entries emerged, entries that were never meant to be seen. The final dated entry was March 13, 2010, just a day before she vanished. "They've walled it up again. The hallway I told you about, the one that was never on the maps, it's gone. Or rather, it's still there, just sealed. I swear I heard someone whisper my name from inside. I think the hospital's hiding something. And I think someone, or something, doesn't want me to leave." And beneath it, in jagged, shaky script, "It's not just walls that close in on you. Sometimes the past does too." But that wasn't all. On the very last page, undated and written in smeared red ink, possibly blood, was one final message. "The wall speaks in silence. Listen close, and you'll hear her heartbeat." Within days, experts in architecture and historical preservation were brought in. They scanned every inch of the East Wing, comparing modern blueprints to archive plans from the 1960s. That's when things got even stranger. According to the oldest blueprints, Crestwood's East Wing was once used for psychiatric isolation, a wing that was shut down in 1972 after a patient died during an unsupervised electroshock treatment. The section was supposedly sealed forever and never reopened. Yet the journal mentioned a hallway that shouldn't have existed and a series of names. One name kept appearing: Dr. Halvorsen. No records of any Dr. Halvorsen were found in Crestwood's medical staff registry. But in the journal's margin, beside his name, Emily had scribbled, "Not a doctor, not anymore." That same night, as a preservation crew prepared to seal off the chamber again for safety, one of their digital recorders, left running, captured something inexplicable. A whisper. For words. "Don't bury me again." The voice was quiet, feminine, broken, and unmistakably real. Sound engineers examined the audio. No signs of tampering, no interference. Just those 4 words, spoken in the empty, sealed-off wing, after the crew had gone for the night. When played back, one of the renovation workers collapsed in a panic. "I heard that exact voice in my dream last week," he said, trembling. "She was standing at the foot of my bed." The city threatened to shut down the site, but local authorities, faced with growing media pressure and internet sleuths flooding social media with theories, announced they would reopen the investigation. At the center of it, the journal, and what might still lie behind other unopened walls. Paranormal researchers volunteered to help. And though skeptics scoffed, the weight of public interest pushed officials to allow one nighttime investigation inside the East Wing. The footage has never been released to the public, but a leaked screenshot from one of the thermal cameras showed something chilling. a human-shaped heat signature pressed flat against the inside of the far wall. With both hands raised, Emily's sister, now in her 30s, flew in from Portland to walk the halls one last time. She hadn't stepped foot inside Crestwood since the vigil held the night after her sister vanished. In a tearful statement outside the gates, she said, "I always knew Emily didn't just disappear. She was trying to tell us something. I think she left clues." In her words, in the building itself. When asked what she believed happened, her voice cracked. "I don't know what thing lives inside those walls, but it took my sister, and maybe now it wants to be found." Was Emily trying to expose a decades-old cover-up buried in the heart of Crestwood? Or was she the first victim of something much older, something woven into the building's bones? And most disturbing of all, if the walls still hold her presence, who else might be trapped behind them? Do you think Emily was warning us, or reaching out for help? Drop your theories in the comments below. The journal had more to say. Forensics had initially assumed the red-stained ink on the final page marked its end. But during a delicate scan with multispectral imaging, a second layer of writing emerged. Entries so faint, it was as if they had been written in desperation, pressed lightly beneath the surface, like secrets too dangerous to leave behind, but too urgent to keep hidden. And in the middle of the page, a phrase repeated 6 times. "The silence remembers the names." Below it, a list. 10 names, handwritten in a trembling script. 9 were followed by question marks, and 1, her own, was underlined twice. D. Keller? Ruth M. Simmons? Dr. L. Stephen Laundrie. Red. 117B. Marion. Maybe? +2. Emily. Emily's name had been written last. Detective Lorna Clay reviewed the entries inside her dimly lit office, the sound of thunder rolling in the background. She had grown up in Crestwood and had never once heard the names Red or 117 be spoken in connection to the hospital. The notation style suggested they weren't all staff. Some could be patients, or worse, victims. But why a laundry worker? Why a room number as a name? Then she saw it. In the top right corner of the page, barely visible beneath the smudge of a fingerprint, was a date. March 2nd, 2010, 12 days before Emily vanished. There had been rumors back then, whispers of employees quitting overnight. One janitor was said to have run screaming from the East Wing during the night shift. No formal complaints had ever been filed. No paper trail. Lorna had always believed those rumors were just ghost stories. But now she wasn't so sure. She tracked down one of the last surviving long-term employees from that time. Harold Dunn, a night porter who had retired just months after Emily disappeared. He lived alone in a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by wind chimes and crosses. At first, he refused to talk. But when shown the journal entries and the names, he went pale. "I knew Simmons," he said, his voice raspy. "He worked pharmacy deliveries. Went missing a week before the girl. They said he ran off with drugs, but he left his badge in the locker. That boy never even drank." When asked about Red, he shook his head slowly. "Don't speak that one's name," Lorna pressed. "Red was a patient or something they kept in the basement wing. No file, no visits, never saw them eat. But sometimes you'd hear them crying. Not like a person, like something trying to sound like one." He stared off toward the wall and whispered, "They used to say the walls had teeth." Back at the hospital, demolition resumed under the cautious eye of law enforcement. The East Wing had become something of a pilgrimage site. People left flowers and candles outside the old entrance. Emily's sister visited every morning, placing a different photo of her smiling younger sibling against the rusted gates. Inside, engineers discovered what had once been a narrow sublevel corridor, leading to a set of steel doors welded shut from the inside. Behind them was a ward that hadn't appeared on any plans. Spray painted on the wall in red letters, 117B. When they pried it open, the smell of old disinfectant and mildew hit them like a wave. The room inside was sealed with thick layers of concrete, except for a small square window high above. Old medical restraints were bolted to the walls. A rusted hospital bed sat in the center, decayed and partially collapsed. and etched into the plaster above it, in dozens, maybe hundreds of frantic, overlapping carvings, was the name Emily. Not once, not twice, but repeated over and over. The team grew silent. Not even the officers dared to speak, until one noticed something even stranger. There was a camera in the corner, a 2000s-era surveillance cam, its light still faintly blinking. But there had been no wiring in or out of the room. The power source? Unknown. When technicians removed the memory unit and played it back, the screen flickered to life with static. Then a frame of footage. A young woman, disheveled in a nurse's uniform, sitting against the far wall, her hands covering her face. Then she looked up. It was Emily. Her mouth moved, and though the video had no sound, a lip reader confirmed the words she appeared to say. "I'm not alone in here." The footage lasted only 16 seconds. Then it looped. There was no sign of how she got there. No evidence of a struggle. No blood. Just her and the silence, and a flickering light overhead that pulsed, slowly, like a heartbeat. Worse still, the timestamp on the video wasn't from 2010. It was from 2015, 5 years after she disappeared. The footage threw the case wide open. How could she have been alive in that room years after her supposed disappearance? Who was feeding her? Why was no record of 117B ever logged? And what was really happening at Crestwood before its sudden closure? Theories flooded the internet. A secret psychiatric program buried by the hospital. A rogue staff member conducting off-record treatments. A supernatural entity feeding on memory and fear. But nothing prepared anyone for what came next. One of the forensic analysts analyzing the tape's noise layer discovered that under the static were words. Not voice. Not music. A whisper. Digitally buried in the static frequency. It said, "She's still here." Could Emily have survived longer than we thought? Or was the footage a manipulated message from someone or something else? The room behind the wall was not what they expected. It wasn't just a hollow space or a forgotten cavity left by poor architectural planning. It was a room, a secret chamber, hidden just a few feet beyond where the hospital's old blueprints said the wall should end. And inside, amid dust and stale air, was a nightmare perfectly preserved by time. The beam from Officer Molina's flashlight passed over the peeling floral wallpaper, oddly out of place in a room no one should have been able to access. A rusted bed frame sat crooked near the far wall, its mattress long since eaten away by rot and mildew. But what chilled everyone to the core was what hung above the bed. A nurse's uniform, perfectly intact, but yellowed with age. It hung from a wooden coat rack like someone had just stepped out of it. The name tag was still clipped to the chest pocket. A. Whitaker. Danielle gasped. Her mother's name. Her mother's uniform. Detective Granger motioned for everyone to stay back while crime scene techs stepped in. They documented everything, every hairline crack in the wall, every item of clothing, every inch of dust. But as they moved deeper into the room, a low creaking sound startled them. Beneath one of the floorboards, something was off. Techs carefully pried the rotting wood free and uncovered a sealed metal box. Its hinges groaned in protest as it was forced open. Inside were handwritten letters, dozens of them, addressed to Amelia. Some were love letters. Others were confessions. One read, "I never meant to hurt you. I just couldn't let you go. No one else saw us." Not really. They didn't understand what we had. "You said you'd tell, but we made a promise, didn't we? I had to make it right." Granger's expression darkened. The signature on the letter was smeared, illegible, but the implication was loud and clear. This was a message from someone who had been close to Amelia. Intimately close. Someone who didn't want her to leave. Danielle clutched the locket around her neck, trembling. The room seemed to grow colder the longer they stood in it. There were still no remains, no sign of Amelia herself, but the chamber was clearly built for a reason. It wasn't storage. It was confinement. A prison. Granger stared at the scanned pages of the letters, obsessing over every line, every smudge, every half-finished thought. It wasn't just a romantic obsession. It was fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of the consequences. The forensics team had matched the paper stock to a batch used by the hospital in the late 2000s, reinforcing the idea that these letters were authentic. The ink used matched hospital-issue pens. The locket Danielle wore? It had traces of skin cells under the clasp, too degraded to match yet, but promising. What still didn't make sense was who had sealed Amelia behind that wall. And more importantly, why had no one noticed? The blueprints of the old hospital renovation from 2011 showed minor changes around that wing, supposedly to make way for new plumbing and electrical upgrades. But someone had added this hidden room to the plan by hand, drawn in pencil, then erased. The scan revealed the ghost of a door that had never officially existed. Granger began tracing every contractor who had worked on the 2011 project. And that's when one name stood out. Raymond Stokes, a former maintenance supervisor with no prior record, who left the job just a month after the renovations were completed. No forwarding address, no tax return, gone. A grainy video clip on Granger's phone showed the silhouette of a man in his late 60s, quietly pushing a shopping cart out of a hardware store. The timestamp was just 4 days ago. The facial recognition scan was a 92% match. Raymond Stokes. Granger closed his eyes. I think we found him. He wasn't ready to tell Danielle. Not yet. They needed to be sure. But the presence of that man's name on the renovation records, combined with the hidden room, the letters, and the clear effort to conceal something for 14 years, it was all too perfectly timed. If Raymond wasn't the one who put Amelia behind that wall, he knew who did. Danielle sat on a bench outside the sealed wing of the hospital, watching construction crews carry materials in and out. The building had become a media circus. News vans parked outside with flashing headlines. Missing nurse case reopened after shocking discovery. But Danielle didn't care about the attention. She only wanted one thing: answers. She reached into her bag and pulled out the last photo ever taken of her mother. Amelia was in her nurse's uniform, holding baby Danielle in her arms, smiling brightly. It was hard to reconcile that warm woman with the eerie silence of the hidden room they'd found her uniform in. Danielle whispered to herself, "Where did you go, Mom? What really happened to you?" And in that moment, she remembered something, a fragment from an old bedtime story her mother used to tell her as a child. A story about a woman who got lost in the walls of a house and whispered through cracks in the paint until someone finally listened. "Mom," she whispered again, "I'm listening." And just when the pieces seemed to align, an old journal, a missing contractor, a hidden room built into the very bones of the hospital. One critical piece remains unsolved. Amelia Whitaker's body was never found. The room had secrets. The letters whispered warnings. And now the key suspect might finally be within reach. But can Danielle handle the truth about what happened that night? And what if Amelia's story didn't end behind that wall? What do you think happened to the young nurse? Could the letters be from someone still working in the hospital today? Do you think the hidden room was her final resting place? Or just the beginning of something darker? The flight to Montana was quiet, filled only with the steady hum of the engines and the unspoken tension between Detective Granger and Danielle Whitaker. She had insisted on coming. "If he knows what happened to my mother," she had said, "I deserve to look him in the eye when he tells us." Granger didn't argue. He understood that kind of resolve, the kind that keeps a person up at night. Raymond Stokes had been found living under an alias, Henry Dorsey, in a secluded trailer park near the Bitterroot Mountains. For the past decade, he had survived on odd jobs, minimal contact with the outside world, and no social media footprint. It was as though he had erased himself, much like someone trying to bury a terrible truth. As they pulled into the gravel lot, Granger glanced at Danielle. "You don't have to go in," he said. She didn't respond. She was already halfway to the door. Raymond was older than the photo suggested. White-haired, stooped, and weathered by solitude. He opened the door slowly when Granger showed his badge. "We need to talk," Granger said. Raymond's gaze shifted to Danielle. Something in his expression changed. Recognition? Maybe. Or guilt. Danielle stepped forward. "You were at St. Mary's Hospital in 2011. You were part of the renovation team. I want to know what you built into that wall." Raymond hesitated, leaning heavily on the doorframe. "I didn't build the wall," he said hoarsely. "I sealed it." Granger stepped in. "And what was inside?" Raymond looked at them both, eyes tired. "A secret. I should have exposed myself years ago. Raymond sat on a worn-out sofa as Danielle and Granger stood frozen, bracing themselves. He started speaking, slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. It was Dr. Lyle Hammond, he said, the head of cardiology. Everyone respected him. Charismatic, brilliant, but behind closed doors, he shook his head. He had a thing for young nurses. The hospital turned a blind eye. So did I. Danielle's heart pounded. The name was unfamiliar, but the dread in Raymond's voice was unmistakable. Amelia caught him, Raymond continued. Found out he'd been falsifying patient records to cover for a string of overdoses, errors he made while under the influence. She told him she was going to report it. Said she didn't care about his reputation. He wiped his hands on his jeans, eyes far away. She disappeared that same night. Danielle felt like the air had been punched from her lungs. Granger leaned forward. Why didn't you go to the police? Raymond swallowed hard. Because he paid me. A lot. I thought she had run off, until I found her. I was doing inspection work in the basement during the renovations. One of the old walls had a false panel. Behind it, she was there. He paused. Still alive. Danielle choked on a gasp. She was unconscious, dehydrated, barely breathing. I pulled her out, panicked, but Hammond was already there. Said she'd gotten violent, attacked him, and that the board would believe him, not her. He said if I didn't help him make her disappear, I'd be next. So, you helped him? Danielle whispered, voice trembling. I built that hidden room, Raymond confessed. I installed it during the renovation. I sealed her in, alive. I told myself I didn't know if she would make it, that I was just doing what I had to do. But every night since, I've heard her in my dreams, screaming through the walls. Raymond opened a drawer and handed Granger a flash drive. He gave me this. Said if anything ever came out, this was his insurance policy. I've never looked at it. Granger inserted it into his laptop. A series of dated video files appeared. Security footage, unauthorized recordings taken from the hospital's maintenance wing. One showed Hammond dragging an unconscious Amelia down a corridor. Another showed Raymond helping him. Danielle turned away, sickened. Then came the final file, a video diary. Hammond, alone in his office, speaking directly to the camera. She found out about the charts, the meds. I didn't want to hurt her. I loved her. Damn it. But she wouldn't listen. I tried to reason with her. It got out of hand. And Raymond, God help him, he just wanted to keep his job. Now we're both trapped. She's gone. The room is sealed, and I can't sleep. It all unraveled fast after that. The footage was turned over to authorities. A warrant was issued for Dr. Hammond's arrest, but it was too late. He died of a heart attack 2 years ago. No justice, no confrontation, just silence. Forensic teams re-examined the hidden room and found bone fragments in the crawl space. Dental records confirmed what Danielle feared. Amelia had died in that room. Days after her disappearance, the walls had kept her secret for over a decade. St. Mary's Hospital was forced to issue a public apology. Several staff who had worked under Hammond were fired or placed under investigation for covering up abuse. Raymond was charged as an accessory, but due to his full cooperation and testimony, he was granted a reduced sentence. Danielle didn't attend his sentencing. She never wanted to see his face again. 1 month later, Danielle stood in the hospital garden, her mother's favorite place during breaks. The hospital had erected a memorial plaque in loving memory of Amelia Whitaker, beloved nurse, daughter, and mother. May her silence speak for the voiceless. Danielle placed a rose beneath it and whispered, I found you, Mom. I brought you home. But part of her would always wonder, had Amelia tried to escape? Had she screamed for help in those first terrifying hours? Had someone, anyone, walked past that wall and ignored her cries? The story of Amelia Whitaker is a story of silence, of secrets hidden behind walls, of a system that protected power over truth. She was failed by those who should have protected her. But her daughter refused to let her memory vanish into the dark. What would you have done if you found a secret room in your home? Do you believe Raymond deserved forgiveness? And how many more secrets lie behind the walls of places we think we know? Drop your theories in the comments. Like this video if you believe stories like Amelia's deserve to be told. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started.